But at the very base of like, I'll just start with like my programming, like when I'm building stuff, it's your squat pattern. So I always explain that as bend of the knee, thinking kind of joint by joint. Your hinge pattern, if you don't know what that is, bend of the waist, a push or pull, push and pull. And you can do that in a vertical or horizontal way. So if it's a pull, that's a pull up. If it's a horizontal row, that's a, bent over row or something like that. Push, you're using your chest or your shoulders. And then I really like to incorporate carries a lot. So figuring out ways to, if that's suitcase carries or farmer carries or something that's a heavy weighted carry. And then I think from there it has like some branches, but kind of like wait to dig into that a little bit more. But that for me is like my core.
That's the trunk of the tree.
That's the trunk of the tree. And I like to just, you can interchange that, which we'll talk about like in so many different ways, because you can get into like bilateral or, if that's both arms or both legs working at the same time, unilateral where you're doing, if it's a split squat or a single arm press, and different ways that you can create like different motor skills and utilizing your body in unique ways to provide greater challenges. But
yeah. So I mean, I'm in agreement there. I think the first place I heard that idea of have you read anything from Dan John?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I used to listen to his podcast a good bit too. Yep.
Yeah. So Dan John, Fundamental 5.
Yep.
That's where I first heard that kind of idea of breaking the movement patterns up into those 5 areas: push, pull, hinge, squat, and carry. And then he also says like there's like a 6th category, which he calls everything else. But yeah, like you were just saying, core work, floor work, just other,
Yeah, and like, like in my program, I like to incorporate. I call it like grunt work, because I think like, like your sleds or like your sandbags or your swings and stuff like that get kind of crazy. Your assault bikes or your rows, like where you're incorporating some endurance stuff. Love to have that aspect. And then I also have found like it fun from a programming standpoint to incorporate a lot of like power development stuff. Like how can we take like what athletics does really, really well? Like you see these guys, programming for collegiate football players, you say, for example, and how can I like take that and provide it in a way that appeals to like your general population type person. So if it's a clean, maybe it's not a barbell clean, but maybe that's a snatch overhead with a dumbbell or something that's more doable.
Yeah. Still requires explosive movement.
But yeah, that's where you can kind of take some of these different elements to put into the pot and mix it all together.
Yeah.
And it becomes fun to kind of make a little puzzle piece out of it. So.
Yeah, for sure. So right there off the bat, we got our foundation of the program, which is you got to push, you got to pull, you got to hinge, you got to squat, and you got to carry.
Yep.
Right. So those fundamental patterns need to be in your program. When, there's a variety of different movements you can use to hit each of those patterns, but each of those patterns should be represented evenly throughout your program.
Yes.
So if you're looking across your week or across your month or whatever your period is, volume within each of those patterns should be about the same.
Yeah.
And we calculate volume by weight times reps times total reps or reps and sets, right? So how many times did you lift 100 pounds in the hinge pattern versus how many times did you lift X amount of pounds in the push pattern? Relatively, obviously your deadlift is going to be heavier than your chest press.
Sure.
But relatively, we should be looking at, pretty equal representation of
distribution
volume. Through those patterns.
Yeah.
So if you're squatting one day, hinging one day, and pulling one day, and then you repeat those before you do a push movement, you're out of balance.
Totally.
Right? So eventually, long term, that would lead to some sort of shoulder dysfunction.
Yes.
Right? Or a postural dysfunction, because not each muscle and pattern and joint is being used evenly throughout the week.
Yeah, it's
and being
almost
developed.
like a game of tug of war. I guess I'm picturing an analogy of like if you're pulling all in this one direction, you're going to get bundled up over here.
Yep.
And you're going to get pulled in on that weak point, if you will.
Yeah. And that's total like bro science theory,
Yes.
but it's also accurate in that
Totally.
you facilitate a muscle group and it stays facilitated. Like the neural drive, the connection from your brain, your nervous system into that muscle is like stronger. So it's going to stay stronger and more activated. And then also as a muscle gets stronger and bigger, it has a higher like resting tone. So you will literally kind of get stuck if you don't balance out
Yeah.
the shoulder. So
This is stuff, I mean, you've been programming so much longer than I have, and that's stuff that is so unique to me that I'm still learning about. So, and mine is like the way I program is full body kind of each and every day. So, I guess the simplest way that I try to break that down or have tried to incorporate that is just making sure that every day incorporates those fundamental elements. And
Yep.
I typically program like 4 days a week. So if I'm doing 4 days a week, every single one of those has one of those. And
Or every single day has all of them.
yeah.
Okay, so each day has
Correct.
all of them.
Every day is going to have a posterior chain, anterior chain for your lower body.
Yeah.
It's going to have some sort of push and or pull.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of just mix up if that's, unilateral, bilateral, you name
Yeah.
it. So,
Makes sense.
that way it kind of, when you look at the spread of the week and your volume, it balances out.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's relative.
Yeah.
So,
So I love the Fundamental 5 and I use it. And
Yeah.
I also like Paul Chek's representation of this. He has 7 movement patterns in his system and he breaks up squat and lunge.
okay.
So, which, I would call, I could categorize a lunge into a squat pattern.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a
Sure.
unilateral
Yeah.
squat pattern. But he breaks up lunge and squat, and then he also has twist. And then he has what he calls gait.
Okay.
But gait encompasses loaded carries,
Yeah.
sled, sprints,
Okay.
walking, running,
Yeah.
It's like gait.
Yeah, it's kind of like a easier way for him, I'm sure, to like create branches or funnels for things to like fall into place
Yep.
through. Yeah.
And in
Because
my
there really is, like, even from a lunge standpoint, there's so many different ways to lunge.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
lateral, dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
In my system, I also kind of use like carry. I also classify carry as loaded carry, sled, sprinting.
Okay.
Anything that's like anything that's in that gait pattern that's loaded or you're training gait, I classify that as carry or gait. I kind of use those interchangeably.
Sure.
So, for athletes or bodybuilders, they're going to be training differently. But as a general population person who's trying to get the most out of the gym in 3 or 4 sessions a week, and their number one focus is for the gym to benefit the way they feel and the way they live their life, balancing and working on the coordination and ability to execute all of these patterns effectively and efficiently is going to have like the best overall effect.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because these are patterns of movement that, while you're not in this perfect form while you're doing it in day to day, they are things that you are doing it in your every single day life. Like I always think about it. I had this one lady that used to train with me at the group fitness gym I was at, and older lady, she would always joke about like, the only reason I need to train my upper body is when I go to reach for that cereal box or whatever in the morning. And I was like, that's a good way to think about it. Like if I need to have the mobility to get overhead, grab up, reach for the counter. I need to have the ability to get out of a chair. I need to have the ability to pick something up off the ground.
Yep.
Need to have the strength to prevent myself from even falling in later years and things like that. Get upstairs. Like that's a unilateral leg movement. Like very, people want to knock the idea of like functional strength training, but that's it. I mean, you're taking everyday basic functions and figuring out how to like get stronger at them.
Yeah. And I will say, I'm sure you're in the same boat. You can do a squat pattern movement on a leg press.
Mm-hmm.
You could do a push pattern on like a hammer strength chest machine.
Sure.
But those things aren't going to teach your nervous system how to manage your body in space when you're going throughout your daily life.
Yeah.
So that there's nothing wrong with those movements, and they can be great additions to a good program. But the bulk of your training should not be on machines because it's going to downregulate your nervous system and your nervous system's ability to coordinate movements through each joint at the same time.
Yes.
To, navigate your body, again, your body in space with gravity and objects around you. Your ability to navigate that effectively is going to be diminished by being on a machine.
Yeah, I fully agree.